I'm going to start a little bit early. Time flies real fast. Thank you for the real big turnout. Appreciate it very much. I'm going to take the 5 minutes that we get started early to go over some things. I've got a list of the things that came up at the Hancock County Town Meeting. I expect most of these things will come up again here today. But if there's things that aren't on this list that other people want to get in, other issues that aren't already brought up at other town meetings, speak up, because my goal here is to get 15 or 20 questions that are so we can cover most of the subjects people want to do. Like if somebody wants to talk about Farm Bill or trade or things like that. We had impeachment. We had vouchers. We had taxes. We had disability. We had term limits. We had Russia. We had health insurance. We had immigration. We had Veterans Administration. We had pipelines. We had climate change. So what I'd like to do before 10 o'clock here is to get a list of what people would like to talk about here. It could be different.
Senator Grassley, we cannot hear you back here. We can't hear you back here.
Okay.
Free press!
Do you have a microphone?
No, we don't have a microphone.
Come closer. Of course not.
We like it. Mr. Grassley, religious freedom. I'd like to know about religious freedom.
Gun control. Gun control.
Okay, now don't everybody talk at once. I'm a slow writer.
Ted Stevens and new legislation.
Staff rights for you. Corporate money.
Respect for truth. Free press! Respect for
Okay,
truth.
now let me tell you how far I am. I'm at religious freedom and guns.
Respect for truth. Ted Stevens. Senator
Supreme Court.
Stevens.
Take money out of politics.
Respect for freedom.
Supreme Court.
Who came after respect for freedom?
Ted Stevens.
Respect for truth.
Ted Stevens, Senator Stevens, and the injustice.
Okay, Senator Stevens. Okay,
Let's talk about re-election.
Supreme Court.
Secretary of Agriculture.
Take money out of politics.
I heard Farm Bill before I heard the other one.
Take money out of politics, please.
Stop stealing Social Security.
Okay, I heard something about, would you say campaign expenses? Is that?
Citizens United. It's not campaign and even lobbyists. Get that crap out of there and represent us. And not the big business and money. Not NRA.
Re-election.
If you say 2 words, I can write it all down.
Freedom of press. Stop stealing Social Security.
Truth and alternative truth. What's the difference?
Social Security.
Congress has got to learn that too.
What was it?
The judicial department needs funding.
Well, is that different than the Supreme Court?
Yes, we need an investigation.
More court appointees and you lock
We need an investigation. Well, they should have investigated Hillary.
LBG rights.
They did.
I think I heard that lady twice.
Yeah.
I want somebody else.
Got all that.
LBG rights.
Why is the GOP being so mean to its citizens and this country with the legislation they're proposing to rape the earth?
What about Republican Party unification?
School choice. It hurts school communities.
Re-election.
Medicaid expansion.
Johnson Amendment.
Well, that's
affordable
taxpayer
health care
what
for
it
all.
costs for security for Obama and not living in the White House.
Now, the
And what
border
about
wall's gonna affect
Trump's
Iowa.
family trips costing taxpayers $11.3 million the first month? as opposed
Social
to
Security,
Obama's
Senator.
average over 8 years of 12.1
Now,
each year.
I want to ask you a question.
Taxpayers ain't ready for
I determined from the town meetings that we had Tuesday that some people would like to have me just listen to them and not ask questions. So if it's possible for some of you that you came, that you just like to say something to me without me responding, I'd like to listen to 2 or 3 or 4 of those people, and then we'll go to some of the questions. Okay, so you two are standing up to do what I just said. So I'll listen to you, sir. But when you're done talking, then I'll listen to her.
Thank you.
Mr. Grassley, it was a despicable lie when he called President Obama the founder of ISIS. It was a racist lie when he challenged President Obama's birth certificate, claiming he'd sent investigators to Hawaii, and they're amazed at what they're finding. It was a delusional and self-serving lie when he claimed to have actually won the popular vote because over 3 million people voted illegally. It was a provable lie when he said that he'd won an electoral college landslide with more votes than anybody since President Reagan. It is a dangerous and destructive lie for him to say that the media in this country are the enemy of the American people. It is the sad truth that the President of the United States is a congenital liar. All these lies, and the many more he has uttered, and the lies that will surely come, have been met with silence or indifference from most elected Republicans across this country, including yourself. American citizens know and deserve better. I have a question. Do you repudiate these lies, and will you challenge lies that he will deliver in the days to come? If not, you and all your colleagues in Congress will own his lying, lock, stock, and barrel to the everlasting shame of the party of Abraham Lincoln.
Before you talk, I'm willing to let you clap as long as you want to clap, but it does take time out of an hour. Hey, but before you speak, let me say something. I forgot to say something to the press. I guess I'm speaking to you guys now. We say 15 minutes at the end of the day before I go to my next meeting. I mean, at the end of this meeting. So we've got a quiet room back here where we'll have a press conference with you guys that you can ask me any questions you want to. But we're going to give priority to the Iowa press first, and then after we get the questions from the Iowa press, we'll take questions from the national press. Is that okay? It's your turn.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here. One thing that I want to mention is my husband and I are on the ACA, which you guys think the American people want to get rid of. If we get rid of it, I'm at a high risk of getting cancer. And I have to go for a mammogram and see a specialist every year. If I lose that, I've had biopsies, I could end up dying of cancer. I don't understand why you guys want to get rid of the ACA other than it's called Obamacare. What about what was Romneycare? You know, we paid $0 for our premium. $0. And when we went in to get signed up again, I told our accountant, I said, I figured you just call and say, don't bother. You know, if you want to do you're here and that's awesome. If you want to do what the people want, listen to what we want. We can't afford what you guys want to do. We can't afford insurance on our own. And why should, I believe what Bernie said, that it should be a right of ours. Free health care, what's wrong with that? Sure, this isn't working the best, but hey, it's saving people's lives. And you guys know that from going to different meetings and like at Tom Cotton's where everybody stood up and said they were on Obamacare. So please, don't repeal it. For my sake, for my kids' sake, my husband's sake, he has a high risk of colon cancer too. So he has to go in for a colonoscopy every single year. His father died of colon cancer. If we don't have that, he could end up getting cancer. And he could die, and I'd be a widow. And another thing I want to talk about is rampant racism in this country now since Trump has become president. I'm not saying you're a racist, that's not, but I'm just saying it's gotten worse. And why would a white woman from Iowa be concerned about it? This white woman has a grandson that's African American. His father is African American. And I am so worried about what his life is when he gets older if this keeps going the way it is. What does it matter what color our skin is? What religion we are? If we're gay, lesbian, transgender, what does it matter? We are all Americans and immigrants too. We're all Americans. We're here. We should have every single right as a white Caucasian person. You know, you complain about illegal immigrants, but weren't we all come from immigrants that came over? Yes, we were. You know, when my husband and I talk about our Norwegian immigrants probably feel they're rolling in their graves right now because they came over to give their family and their relatives a better life. But what do we have now? I really am embarrassed to be a United States citizen for what this country is doing.
How un-American can you?
Because of Donald Trump and what he's done. He's made Canada, he's a Canada, he's in Australia, Mexico, China, you know, and everybody else. And
I'm not going to shut you off. Just stay. I hope that whether you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, I hope that we're going to be Iowa nice and respect each other's opinions. So let her finish now.
We have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
You can do it today.
Can I finish? I think we need to come back together and get rid of this hatred and, like I said too, get money out of politics. And I'm sure, you know, I know it's not just Republicans, it's Democrats too. You know, you guys are voted by us, but it's all like the Koch brothers and all them. They're pushing all kinds of money into the system, and even on the Democratic side. Why not represent us instead of them? Thank you. You work for us.
Let's take two more people that want to just have me listen to them. You want to be the next one?
Yeah, Senator Grassley, Larry Lockley from Mason City, Iowa. And I just want to take a minute and thank you for doing this. I can see the stress that you're under in a crowd like this, and it's pretty divided. So I want to just share this quick thought. I've been fishing, Senator Grassley, with a group of guys, about 20 strong, for 30 years. I got Democrats on one side of the aisle and Republicans on the other. And I'm conservative, but I get along good with my Democratic friends. And the one thing that I don't think this crowd represents is my crowd of friends that I talk with. And my Democratic friends are telling me that they're sick and tired of the protests. They're sick and tired of all this pressure on politics. First Amendment right. And
Politicians need pressure.
Respect his opinion.
I will tell you this, 50% of my Democratic friends have come over to the conservative side of the table.
Can I once again urge you to have respect for other people's opinions? That doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. This lady's been standing up, so I think I'll call on her.
My name is Gail Knoll, and I'm from Dubuque, Iowa. And I have several concerns. I'll try and keep it short. My biggest concern is why are you not supporting an independent investigation into Donald Trump and Russia? It's very well known. Donald Trump's personal lawyer is trying to get sanctions against Russia lifted. Now that is very worrisome to me. And another thing, I feel that the raids and deporting people have to stop. So far it has not been criminals. I'm not against deporting criminals, but so far it's been mothers taken from their children, and they're using children to lure the mothers there. They're going to the schools where the mothers are picking the children up at the buses, and then they take the mother in front of their children and take her away to a detention center. And both of those things bother me a lot. But thank you for listening to me.
Now, did you want to just make a point to me? Yes,
So I have a question.
okay, sure. Anybody else that just wants me to listen before we ask questions? You want me to listen to you?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
My name is Kathy Bellis, and I'm a Presbyterian pastor in Brud and in Green. And I would very much like you to pay attention to the move to repeal the Johnson Amendment to the tax code. I think it's very important that we keep the church out of politics as much as possible. The Constitution does say that we need to separate the two. What I find most helpful is when the pocketbook is involved. And so if it will endanger our tax status, most churches and most pastors will keep political stuff out of the pulpit. Thank you.
Before I call on you to ask a question, this lady ended with a question on Russia. Can I answer that first, and then we'll go to you? There are at least 3 things going on right now in regard to Congress and Russia and the investigation. I think you're asking about the investigation. Number 1 would be Senator Feinstein, who leads the Democrats on the committee that I chair. We have sent a letter to DOJ and to the Department of Justice and to the FBI that next week we hope to get an update that may be a secured briefing or it may be open. I don't know at this point. I can't tell you whether it needs to be secured or not, but we're going to get a briefing for anybody that's on the Judiciary Committee, so all 20 of them can attend. And then last week, Senator Feinstein and I met with Senator Whitehouse, the Democrat, and Senator Graham, the Republican. They had a subcommittee of my committee that they asked for an investigation of it, not just about Russia and the United and the U.S. elections, but also getting into things like Russia trying to interfere now with the presidential elections in France. And then the third thing would be what started before, and maybe even before Flynn's resignation, is the intelligence committees of the House and Senate. And and the intelligence committee are different than other committees because they have an equal number of Democrats and an equal number of Republicans. They have already started an investigation, and that's probably where it's going to, for the most part, center in those committees at this point. Now the lady standing up.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Grassley, as the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, it was your job as our elected senator to offer advice and consent on some Supreme Court nominee nominated by President Obama. I'm not sure what version of the Constitution you're reading. It doesn't say confirming judges is part of your job in the U.S. Senate. You deliberately obstructed justice and ignored the U.S. Constitution. Now that your party's in the White House, you fully support the nomination of Judge Neil Gorsuch by the now so-called President of the United States. Please explain to us, your Iowa constituents, your hypocrisy and your willingness to ignore our Constitution.
No. Okay, now for some of you that would have followed this issue last fall, you won't hear me say anything different except what she asked about the nominee that's been put out. But remember, just before the election, maybe 2 months, I was asked questions, if Hillary Clinton was elected president, would we move ahead with the nomination she did? And up until midnight, election night, everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to be elected president. So I said yes, just as soon as that nomination is made, even though she's a Democrat, if I nominate somebody that I'd rather have somebody of a different kind, I would move that ahead. So now getting back to answer her question, why we did what we did when we didn't move the nomination last time. And you heard me say all this last year, so you're going to get the same story because there's only one answer to your question. That is probably at the end of Reagan's term of office, Senator Biden, so that's why I called it Biden rule, but it's not really a written rule. The Biden rule, he said that if there's a vacancy at the end of the Reagan administration, that it should be filled by the new president. Then the same statement was made by him in 1992 at the end of the H.W. Bush campaign. And then, of course, we had a Democrat president, so that statement wasn't made between 92 and 2000. And then when the last, even 18 months before the last year of the H.W. or the W. Bush presidency, Schumer picked up on the Biden rule and said if there's a vacancy at the end of W. Bush's campaign, that the new president should fill it. So then when it come to a year ago now, Scalia time, then you can't have one rule for Republican presidents and one rule for Democrat presidents. So we kept it vacant for that period of time. Now the constitutional requirements, you have two steps. The president nominates, and by the way, we did have a chance to give advice to this president. Senator Schumer, Senator Feinstein, Senator McConnell, and me went to the White House to talk to Trump before he made this nomination to advise the president. So the advice sometimes is used and sometimes it isn't used. So we had that opportunity to have an hour-long meeting with President Trump on this vacancy. So there's two steps. One, because this is all within the checks and balances of government. The president nominates, and the Congress and the Senate confirms. Confirms can be one of three things. Confirm can be not to confirm, it can be to confirm, or it can be to withhold any decision whatsoever. And the legitimacy of me saying we don't have to do anything is Senator Reid in 2004 or 5, when there was a George W. Bush nominee from the Supreme Court. Senator Reid, the Democrat leader, said that there's nothing in the United States Senate or the U.S. Constitution that says Congress has to act. So that's the constitutional part of it, and that's the rationale behind it. Stand up, so talk loud so they can hear you.
Okay, I was going to ask about gun control and what you're going to do about that, but I think more important, the first gentleman that talked, he talked about Trump's lies and about the attack on the press. So I would like you to respond to how you're dealing with his lies and the attack on the press, and hopefully someday you'll not be holding the NRA, will do something about gun violence. But right now, these lies are critical.
It's very common sense why freedom of the press is in the First Amendment. Because under King George III, there wasn't freedom of the press, and you could be jailed for saying something against the king. Well, that's also a rationale for freedom of speech. Or I suppose they used to put Baptist ministers in prison in Virginia because you were a Baptist and wasn't a member of the Episcopalian Church. Under any circumstances, First Amendments are very important basic rights that people have. So it's there because it's a curb on, no, it's a guarantee of responsible government. They are the policemen for our system of government. And that's why you have to have a strong press. Now, the only thing I would say to you folks from the press here, more so than I would them, I don't think it's legitimate to say that you're enemies of the people, but I do, this may not apply to you folks, but when 93% of the Washington journalist establishment said that they voted Democrat, I think you could question the bias of the people.
In your previous statements regarding the Supreme Court and the up and down vote of the Senate, you mentioned the end of term several times. What do you consider the end of a president's term? Is it the last 2 years? Is it the last year? Is there? What do you consider?
If I want to explain his question, if I'm not explaining it right, you tell me. I think basically what you're asking would be at the it'd be 1 year, but the answer to your question is you probably want to know if I would do the same thing in 2020 if Trump is president and we have a vacancy. The answer is yes.
End of term is 1 year then.
Well, for Schumer in 2007 it was 18 months.
Okay.
See, but for me it's the last year.
Mr. Grassley, I'd ask you about religious freedom. Do you mind if I follow up with that?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm an atheist. I don't know if there's any other atheists in here, but we're a growing population of voters in this country. I'm having a hard time not feeling like we're living under an American Taliban. You want to control women's reproductive rights. You want to put God back in school, your God, not anybody else's. And then one of our constituents or one of our team members on the Eastern Iowa Atheists send you an email about the Johnson Amendment, which I really appreciate what you had said about it. And you say you want to repeal it, you want to take that away.
If she had asked me a question, I would have answered the same way.
Sure. Can you see our struggle, can you see our concern as voters that don't prescribe to dogma or any kind of doctrine? Why that would be a concern of ours? Where's our religious freedom? No. Are you going to protect ours?
You ain't got no God, so why do you have religious freedom?
How so?
Before I do that, since you told me what your religion is, or lack of religion, can I tell you what mine is? I believe in Jesus Christ as my personal Savior. I worship Him as much as I can. What I want to make sure that this minister or any other minister can't be jailed just because she makes a political statement from the pulpit. That's what I think the Johnson Amendment restricts and violates freedom of speech and freedom of religion and anything else. But there is one aspect of it that I have not investigated. There was some indication in the press, I don't know whether it's the way Johnson Amendment actually works, so give me this leeway that I'm not sure. But if it allows the use of church contributions to promote candidates, I think that goes too far.
And that's one part of it. Religious freedom is a big issue for me and a lot of Americans, because if any city, state lawmaker can create laws that discriminate against groups of people, like with the FATA.
You don't have to worry about Congress. All you got to do is worry about the Supreme Court, and they're strengthening freedom of religion, not weakening it.
They're using it as a sword. They're not using it as a shield to protect the religious expression from government interference. So what you're saying is it's okay if another believer in Christ wants to deny somebody dinner at a restaurant. Or like we have teachers here that talked about Betsy DeVos and her plan to bring God's kingdom to our public schools. Is that appropriate?
Congress has answered that through the Restoration of Freedom, or the Freedom of Religion Restoration Act, and that's been upheld by the courts. And don't forget that bill was passed specifically because the Supreme Court ruled in 1990 that somebody in Oregon was being denied, the state of Oregon was denying their freedom of religion. Tell me where you were married in this case. Next question.
Senator.
I'm not trying to avoid anybody because I don't know most of you. So don't accuse me of trying to avoid it. I think this lady here was standing up before anybody else. You've been very patient, so why don't you go ahead? And if you wonder why I turn my back on you, I make a few notes here of what comes up.
That's all right. All right. I'm Tamara Lytle. I'm from Mason City, Iowa. And Senator, you voted yes on Trump's pick for the Secretary of Education despite national outcry. Betsy DeVos has attended private schools for secondary and post-secondary education, has never worked in a public school, is not knowledgeable of current laws protecting disabled students, and is a strong advocate of school choice. School choice doesn't benefit and in fact endangers rural communities by siphoning away already scarce funds from poor rural schools. And the rural population makes up 35.8% of Iowa's total population. Why would you vote to jeopardize Iowa's quality of education, and how is Betsy DeVos a qualified candidate for your vote?
If you're a teacher, you need to be praised. I was educated to be a teacher, but I don't think I could teach today. So compliments to you. Now let me answer her question. Why not? Let me answer her question. And I'm going to answer it the same way I just answered it at the St. Edgar High School for the high school kids there. There's a general perception, you don't have to agree with it or not, but there's a general perception among both Republicans and Democrats in Washington that may not be true this time, but this is very much an exception, that a president gets elected and has to carry out the responsibilities of which he was elected, that person ought to have the team that they need to get the job done. So there's great deference. Like for instance, in the first day of the Obama administration, we approved 8 people. I voted for somebody like Eric Holder to be Attorney General, even though I didn't agree with Eric Holder. I voted for him based on that proposition that the president ought to have his chief law enforcement officer to be able to help him carry out
But
his
don't you believe the team should be qualified?
Yes.
Well, then we would not have Tillerson being Secretary of State. He's never
It's a bipartisan issue.
So what you're saying is you should probably take somebody that's been a diplomat to be Secretary of State. Well, Senator Kerry never would have been Secretary of State. So you're looking for somebody that can do the job. Now, the fears that you raise, can't be carried out by the Secretary of Education because she has to carry out the laws, and there's 4 programs that she administers, and we appropriate the money for, and she's got to spend the money for it. Special education, vocational education, reading programs, and college programs, and she's got to do that. The only way you said something about hurting the public schools in any state, the state legislature, the local school districts are determination of that. The only way that she can't do anything about Charles City having a high school, because only the voters of Charles City can make the determination if you're going to join someplace else or close the school down or anything else, you know. So she doesn't have anything to do with that. But I think what she's being criticized for is because she was head of a nonprofit organization that wanted to give parents more choice in education. What's wrong with giving parents more choice?
That's right.
See,
Because
so-
the students who the people who do not have a choice, who cannot move, are left behind when the funds follow to other private schools. And those funds can go to religious schools. I don't want to pay with my money for religious education. I want my money to go to public schools.
You need to talk to me about that. You don't need to worry about her doing that because she can't do that. She can't do that.
She is
That's the law.
supporting legislation and the that voucher program that would do this and endanger rural communities. So yes, I am talking to you. Are you going to oppose that?
Well, the voucher programs come under state law, not under federal law. The only place they come under federal law is within the District of Columbia.
I have a follow-up question on that. I'm a retired teacher, 37 years. I have my questions typed out for you, sir, so you don't have to write them down. As a retired teacher, I was looking at the House Bill 610 that was introduced by your colleague, Steve King. It supports DeVos's goal of distributing federal funds from primary and secondary education in the form of vouchers to eligible students and repeal certain rules relating to school lunch nutritional standards. These are federal dollars. This is not state. Since I fear that you will vote party lines, I voted for you many years ago and I thought you were moderate, and you were a moderate then. But these are questions I now have. How do you feel the voucher system will benefit small districts like Charles City or Dike New Hartford? How do you ensure that public schools have the proper funding to keep them competitive? I think you'd be shocked to find out how much public school teachers pay out of their own pockets to keep their classrooms running. And how do you keep public schools from becoming dumping grounds for special needs students, mentally or behaviorally challenged students, or low-income students whose parents don't have the means to transport their children to other communities? And those are the 3 questions I have written for you.
The federal government's not going to make any decision that the state of Iowa has to have a voucher program. They're going to make that decision.
I don't understand King's.
I don't know King's legislation, so don't ask me to comment on something I haven't read. The federal government isn't going to do that. They did do it for the District of Columbia, and but that's not in operation anymore. They're in the District of Columbia, but that's the only place that the federal government's had a voucher program. The other thing is, when it comes to, if you're worried about what the federal government might do about education, and we're not going to decrease funding for education at the federal level, but remember, only 5.5% of what's spent in Iowa comes from the federal government. The other 94.5% comes from state and local taxes. So the impact that we have on the schools of Iowa are relatively minute compared to states like Mississippi, where maybe it's 15%, because we do such a good job of educating people in Iowa, and we have a higher economic index. You were in the Senate.
Senator Grassley, are you talking to me?
Yeah, you. I'm not trying to avoid him, you just were in front of him.
Congratulations on being elected. I don't know if this is fake news or not, but I heard that you are one of the older folks in the government these days and have a lot of experience. And instead of a question, I have a request. I'd like you to lead all your younger folks away, if you can, from partisanship and try to lead them toward compromise and negotiation and stuff that makes our government work rather than
Senator Grassley.
Well, I'm going to answer him first. I think the best thing I can tell you about leading is the work of the last 2 years on the Judiciary Committee, when we had 30 bills out of committee, and every one of those bills were bipartisan bills, and 18 of them were signed by the President. And then the 10 years that I led the Republicans, or were chairman of the Finance Committee, with Senator Baucus, the Democrat, sometimes chairman, all the 3 or 4 bills that got out of committee were bipartisan bills. So I think the best, I hope I'm setting the example that you would want me to set. Go ahead. But you think I'm going to not want to talk to you?
I was getting there. So this morning I heard you on the radio.
What was I saying?
You were saying people were upset because people are coming out because Hillary didn't win the election. No. I would like to know how many people in this room are genuinely upset that the politicians aren't working for the working people.
I'm not paid. Not paid.
Start doing things for the working people instead of to the working people. Yeah. Who is our boss? The Koch brothers, Americans for Prosperity, Alec, or Trump?
Alice.
If so, where do all of the folks in this room fall in line?
Keep government and corporations separate.
What is your definition of farming? Do you stand with independent family farmers? Kind of seems to me, and many other Americans, that big money is the name of the game, and your guys' boss. We the people are your employers. We the people are your boss. And rural America is mad as heck that you aren't listening to us. We don't want bread next to CAFOs. We don't want impaired waterways. We don't want to smell raw sewage when we are outside. You know, I'm a farm girl, and I can stand a lot of smells. And I'm quite fond of the smell of manure. But raw sewage sprayed onto fields right by our house, that's a whole different story. My 4-year-old daughter and I went for a walk together the other day, and the entire time all we could smell was raw sewage that had been sprayed on our fields from a CAFO by our house. My family is one of the lucky ones in this state that don't have a CAFO as a neighbor. We just get the occasional stench of CAFO sewage being sprayed onto our fields near our house. The only thing I could think about is what nasty things my 4-year-old daughter and I were breathing in. And all the people that have died by toxic, noxious fumes while cleaning out CAFO pits. When did rural America become a third world country and get poo-pooed all over by sewage that's being sprayed on our fields literally?
Too long.
Let her speak.
Yeah.
Let her speak.
In Iowa, we have 750 impaired waterways and 625 years compared to 625 years ago. And meanwhile, the nitrogen is flowing into our rivers, lakes, and streams and private wells. Are you comfortable with Iowa being sacrificed for industrial agriculture? The rural residents of America demand and deserve clean water, clean air, quality of life, sustainable food sources, sustainable practices in agriculture, and a future.
Let her speak.
Sermon, come on, it's a sermon.
I'm done.
A couple questions she asked. Number one, she wants to know when we're going to start listening to people. I hope that this is pretty good evidence that I want to listen to people. And thirdly, she wanted to know about definition of a family farm. A family farm, as opposed to a corporate farm, is where the family does most of the labor. They might hire some help, but they do most of the labor. They control the capital, and they make all the management decisions. Whereas a corporate farm is somebody maybe in Chicago that owns land or an institution out here. They hire a manager, and the manager hires labor. And I think the family farm, with the family being in the middle of it, is the strongest economic institution that you can have in agriculture. And as evidence of the fact that I'm a supporter of the family farm, I think you all would recognize the Iowa Farmers Union as not necessarily being a conservative organization. And 11 years in a row, they have given me a plaque that I like to hang in my office that describes my support for the family farmer. I call on you.
They should live on the farm then too.
Senator Grassley, I want to also echo what...
Just in case somebody over here who I don't recognize who it was, or which one it was, do you live on the family farm? I live on the family farm. Go ahead.
I also want to echo what some other people have said, and thank you for being here today. We know there's a lot of legislators across the country that are avoiding events like this, so we do appreciate you doing this. Welcomed me into your office almost 40 years ago as an 18-year-old, along with a bunch of other Charles City students who were on a people-to-people tour, and I was very starry-eyed at that time. In the years since then, I have voted for you many times. And I have had a lot of respect for the integrity and the way you've represented Iowa at times. My question today is actually in a few parts, and I promise I'll be very brief. I would respectfully ask if you could just give me a one-word answer after each of these parts so I can keep it brief. Would you say that where your job is concerned, it's more important for your actions to be influenced by those who have contributed to your campaign
those who have voted for you, or all Iowans as a whole?
I wouldn't have town meetings if your position wasn't important. But it isn't only a town meeting like this, it's also, like right now, 19,000 emails behind answering as an example. Maybe tomorrow will be 15,000 behind, or we could have 25,000. But also those and the postal mail and the telephone calls that come in, all of that is one opportunity of finding out what people think.
So I am understanding you to say Iowans as a whole is what's most important, is that correct? And actually, you kind of led me to my...
But in the end, you gotta have a yes or no vote, you know?
Right. So I personally know from friends of mine who have also had the same conversations with your staff, that it's your office policy to not release data about the pros and cons calls or emails or letters that you've gotten into your office on particular issues. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So in the case of specific issues like Betsy DeVos's nomination, can you just tell us, without divulging that specific data, did you have more pros or more cons in support of Betsy DeVos?
More cons.
Okay. In the case of Jeff Sessions for Attorney General, did you have more pros or more cons?
More cons.
In the case of Scott Pruitt for EPA, did you have more pros or more cons?
More cons.
In the case of Steve Bannon as a principal member for NSC.
I can make it easy for you. It eventually got to a point where people called up and they said, we're against every one of Trump's nominees.
Okay, and then my last question about that is, do you believe that those people who are calling in with those opinions are paid to do so?
No.
Right? Okay. So as a civil
well, let me
servant...
back up. They aren't paid to call in, but sometimes, this is how it operates sometimes. There's an 800, they are calling all over the state or something, and then there's a third party involved, and they will maybe call you up and say, would you like to talk to Senator Grassley? And then they'll plug you into my office. Now that's paid for by some organization.
Okay.
But
so
also,
I've called you almost every day since November 9th. Do you believe that I am paid to do so?
No.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. My last thing then is, as a civil servant of over 40 years, obviously legacy is important to you. So as you are looking at having just under 6 years left in your last term, what would you like to be your legacy? And do you feel that what you're doing right now in the votes that you've had in response to those calls and emails that we just talked about, are you truly representing Iowans?
how do you know it'll be my last term? Don't forget Strom Thurmond served until he was 100 years old.
I think your answer to my question is going to be a big determinant in whether this is your last term.
When I'm asked this more by high school students than I am by people like you that are older, and that is based on this proposition. I don't want to just name one thing. I think I would start with the False Claims Act when I got passed 30 years ago, where if there's a reported fraudulent use of money and you report it and you win the case in court, you get a percentage of it. That's brought $53 billion back into the federal treasury.
I don't doubt that at all, but I'm talking about the votes that you've had
No,
now.
you're talking about my legacy.
I'm talking about the legacy that you're leaving now.
This term.
Oh,
You've changed.
everything I've done in the United States Senate could be considered part of legacy. First of all, I'm not worried about legacy. I don't care anything about it. History will take care of that, and I'll be in the grave before they ever make that determination. The second thing is, remember the complaints that people had from the grassroots of Iowa, that Congress had exempted itself from a lot of laws. So 20 years ago, I got a bill passed that all of those laws that Congress had exempted itself from apply to us. Then in 2003, because Medicare never had covered pharmaceuticals, I got Part D of the Medicare pass, so the seniors can have access to part.
But we need to negotiate prices.
And then I think how pensions are protected now comes from our pension reform bill. And then probably the one that you see every day in Iowa that will be a legacy is the alternative energy of wind and biofuel, because I'm the author of the wind energy tax credit, and today we get 36% of our energy from wind. Those are the things.
That we want back.
Okay. Somebody,
Social Security, sir.
Who brought up about the farm bill?
That was me, sir. I was touching on it.
Social Security, sir. Senator. Social Security. We hear all the time, it's kind of a scare tactic all the time about how bad Social Security, a bad situation Social Security is. Okay? I like Bernie Sanders' idea of raising the cap. But I don't want to see that done until there's a bill passed, and I'm asking you to introduce a bill to stop the stealing of Social Security.
Yeah.
Social Security would be in fine shape if you haven't all taken the surplus every year and use it elsewhere. You ought to pass legislation that says it's in the lockbox that Al Gore brought up in 2000, that the Social Security surplus stays with Social Security for perpetuity. Social Security would be fined if you all hadn't stolen it. Now, when we borrow something and don't pay it back, we have a price to pay. It's called thievery. It's called theft. You guys have been taking the surplus ever since Ronald Reagan. And I think this year they took $150 billion. Am I correct? Why is that not left alone, the left in Social Security, so Social Security could be fined? A lot of us are counting on Social Security and Medicare. If we don't have that, we're in deep doo-doo, boss. What are we going to do? Die in the streets? You need to leave Social Security where it belongs, in Social Security, and stop taking the surpluses and using it elsewhere.
Whoever you are.
Me?
No.
Me? My name is Tom Willett. I'm from Mason City, Iowa. You don't come to Mason City. You don't come to Mason City.
Come to Mason City.
No, you.
Are you going to answer me?
There's $2.7 trillion that's owed to the Social Security Trust Fund, and that will keep benefits at 100% until 2034. And if Congress doesn't do something between now and then, it'll go down to 75% of that.
So stop stealing it. Stop stealing it. You get my point? You keep taking the surplus. If you leave it there, it wouldn't be in that much trouble. Leave it there.
In fact, the two.
Obama took $800 billion.
Yeah, I'm not arguing about it. I'm not saying what party. I'm saying whoever. Stop it.
By the way, the $800 billion they took out of Medicare, not out of Social Security for Obamacare. But see, the bill right now, since 1986, is built up to that $2.7 trillion.
But you're not answering it. You're not answering it.
Well, is this a case?
He has to propose the bill.
He said they owe it.
Oh, hey, where's my staff?
That doesn't mean it's there.
Will you,
They owe it because they
will you
stole
meet
it.
with him? Will you meet with him afterwards? Because this is a case, and he doesn't want it. He doesn't want it out in the public. So you talk to her afterwards.
That's fine, or I've actually got to get going.
Senator Grassley, first thing I want to say is I'm offended by your comment that you made when you walked by the girl and said that you would not want to work in today's public schools. Today's public schools are as good or better than they've ever been, and if they're sliding down, it's because states are not funding them.
I would not have the discipline, I would not have the nature to teach today in the public school. That's not anything negative towards the public schools. That's me versus the things that teachers like her have to confront in the classroom. I could not confront them.
I don't think there's a lot of... My question, please.
Go ahead.
I'm still worried about something like 2008, the recession and happening again, Wall Street going wild. Will you vow that you will protect Dodd-Frank, all parts of it, especially the Consumer Protection Agency?
Exactly.
I think the Consumer Protection Agency will continue to exist, but there's three things that keep it from congressional oversight. One, they don't have to come to Congress for their money. They get it directly from the Federal Reserve. I think we're going to change that so it comes from Congress. So they have to appear before Congress and be refunded. There's some of their things that are not subject to court review. And I don't think there's anything that goes on that bureaucracy should be immune from court review. And then thirdly, not just with the Consumer Protection Agency, but with Dodd-Frank generally, there is a requirement for community banks to have the same requirements that Wall Street has. And community banks were not part of the problem of the 2008, and they need some exemption from some of those regulations that ought to still continue to apply to Wall Street.
I agree with that. Thank you for
Senator
getting something
Grassley.
done.
You haven't asked a question yet.
No, I haven't.
Go ahead.
I'm a cancer survivor, and I've been covered, I am covered under my husband's health insurance program through his employer. But what assurances can you give me that if he were to decide to retire, if I wanted to switch to my employer's health care, what assurances can you give me that my pre-existing condition would not make me pay through the roof? And a related question is, I have two daughters, and one of them has a better paying job and good health care insurance. The other one has a very low paying job, and she relies on Medicaid and Planned Parenthood for her health care. With my having cancer, I want both of my daughters to be able to be screened and stay on top of their health care so that if I have passed this along, that they could catch this early. What assurance? And so I really don't want you to defund Planned Parenthood either, because tax dollars don't go to the abortions, and people rely on that for their health care.
I think the only, there's either 167 million or 177 million people that are on employer-sponsored health insurance. What we're doing on Obamacare is not going to affect that. Then, let's see.
What about my pre-existing condition if I were to have to switch?
Well, yeah, but see, if you have to switch, why would you have to switch?
Well, if he were to retire, and it might be maybe financially better for me to go through my employer's health care.
Is that going to be a supplemental to Medicare, or is it?
No, not for me.
Okay. Then, at least everything I've heard, except one plan, everything else I've heard on 3 or 4 other plans that are being put forth by various members of Congress, the ACA requirement, the pre-existing conditions would be left alone.
Do you support that? Do you support that?
Senator. You must not be listening to me during the election.
Also, the Planned Parenthood thing, because I want both my daughters to get health care. Also, the Planned Parenthood part.
Okay. Senator. If there's anything done about Planned Parenthood, the same amount of money or more money will be available for every other health care organization that can deliver.
Where are those agencies in?
And then you're talking about your daughters being on there until they're 26.
No, they're beyond 26 now, but one of them is in a low-paying job, and she needs that to be able to afford to get health care.
Not tax credits.
Yeah, tax credits. She doesn't make enough for tax credits to help her. That doesn't help poor people.
Health savings doesn't help her.
Well, but they're refundable tax credits.
But she doesn't make enough money.
I have great appreciation and respect for you and your office. I've been to Washington to see action. I have ultimate respect for the office of the presidency. How is the Republican leadership going to help the president to be more truthful and more fact-filled in what he says to the public and the world?
We can suggest, but I think that Donald Trump is Donald Trump. And most everybody that knows him, and I don't pretend to know him very well, I've had maybe 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there over the course of his campaigning in Iowa. I've had a couple conversations with him since he's been president, but I wouldn't say that I know him. But people that do know him say very clearly that Donald Trump's going to continue to be Donald Trump.
So he's able to lie on the way Donald Trump.
You gotta get to the polygraph.
Yeah, but you're changing.
I don't think against the man, against what he's saying in public.
He used the board asking for his tax refunds. That's one of the major He will not release his tax forms. So my question is a yes or no question?
I'm not going to answer your question because you had your questions answered at another town, so we'll...
I didn't ask a question at another town.
No, but you spoke a lot at the other town.
I did not say excuse me. I did not say
Trump supporter. He's being a fair.
Nice.
Trump supporter.
What I'd like to know,
Can you talk loud so that they can hear you? I can repeat it. But go ahead.
what I'd like to know, I get a lot of these people hearing, going against President Trump saying he doesn't tell the truth. Well, there's a lot of times it's being whitewashed over in the media. Left-wing media. Not his Twitter.
When's the last time you've seen so much pain or people worried? Since you've been around, look around, people got worries about it. War, Social Security, you've got an administration who don't give two hoots from what any of us here. You are our representatives. We need you to protect us.
No, you can do it yourself. You can do it yourself.
The only reason I wanted to write down the notes that you just said.
We need you. We know that. You work for us. We do respect you. But you've got to help us with this administration because you clearly know that we've never seen anything like this before.
Agreed.
You know?
So much pain.
People are scared. Look, they're worried.
They're not Republicans if they're scared.
I'm not worried.
No, we're not all.
I'm worried.
Senator Grassley.
I hope that you realize the president proposes, but only Congress disvotes.
I understand.
That's the check you're asking?
Yeah. You're watching out for it. That's what we have to do. The best you can do.
I have a question on gun control. I'm confused. I want you to explain something to me. In 2013, we said that mentally ill people, we should have a database to list people that have mental health issues. They were put on a list, a database. This was given to the FBI to keep people from getting guns. Recently, we have the legislation that these people now will have access to guns. These people have gone through screening at Social Security. They've been deemed mentally incompetent. Why are you giving 70,000 people access to guns?
Let me say it. First of all, I'm going to have to go over a little bit. So whoever told me this had to be the last part, we're going to be a little bit late for the news conference. Here, I'm going to, before I answer your question, and then you'll be the last one to answer, I'm going to tell you how the process works. If there's a regulation written, and we can put up a resolution of disapproval, and if that's voted and signed on by the president, the regulation goes away. So a week ago, you're talking, I think you didn't mention this, but I think you're talking about the fact that I sponsored a resolution of disapproval for a Social Security administration ruling that would put people on a gun ban list. And so you're interpreting that as meaning that I want people that are mentally ill to be able to buy guns. And that isn't true because there's laws already, if you're mentally ill, you can't buy guns. But in this particular instance, and I'll explain it this way, there's three of you right here. Let's say you go in for Social Security. Okay, you go in for Social Security, and she's taking care of you here at the Social Security office. And she says you need a third party to manage your Social Security because you aren't responsible. So he picks you to manage his Social Security. This lady that works at the Social Security office all of a sudden decided he's mentally incompetent. And no, just her saying that you gets it that way. And so just to justify in a way that maybe you can understand the legitimacy of what we did. You know the American Civil Liberties Union is a very liberal organization. You know the NRA is a very right-wing organization. And they both supported what I did last week. See? Thank you all very much.
Remember who you work for.
Charles City Press here, sir. Regarding a February 14th press release and comments you made, you reported Mexico is considering retaliations against the U.S. by buying agriculture products from South America. What can you do to protect Iowa agriculture exports from retaliation against Trump tweets or Trump policies?
Yeah. Well, I only have to worry about... I only have to worry about if he makes some sort of an agreement, then the final say will be Congress will have to vote on any changes in NAFTA. So that's where you have the final vote. In the meantime, I've had an opportunity to meet with Peter Navarro, who is on the White House staff as an advisor to the president on trade. And so based upon the very same day, this Mexican senator that you're referring to that said we need to buy our corn from Brazil and Argentina instead of from Iowa if the United States does something to hurt Mexico. That brought up two things that I told to the Peter Navarro. And I said, number one, remember that if you do get an agreement, it better be a good agricultural agreement because it takes a good agriculture provision of any free trade agreement with farmers and commodity groups and farm organizations behind it to get manufacturing and services through. It's a locomotive, more or less. The other thing is, remember when you're doing these negotiations, you got to consider that if we do something that some other country doesn't like in regard to trade relations, usually agriculture and the farmers are the first ones hurt by it. So take that into consideration. Now, up to this point, and advising, that's about the only role we have because the president does a negotiation. But remember, Congress has the final word.
So is there any protections that Congress can do if representatives from Mexico just policy discussed or tweet we don't like, we're going to take actions right now? Is there any protection you can do?
They aren't going to take any action until the United States does something they don't like, and I don't know whether, hopefully the United States won't do that. Hopefully any changes in NAFTA is done by good faith negotiation. But remember, Congress has the final word.
What kind of impact do you think that these kind of town halls are having, not only here in Iowa with yourself and Senator Ernst, but all across the country? We're seeing these popped up where they're well-populated and fairly hostile.
Yeah. I think probably the same thing as what happened in 2009. They are a way for people to express their views to Congress, which is a very necessary part of the representative process. It's a two-way street. Those of us elected are one half of it. The other, our constituents, are the other half. And this is to have representative government, the best way to do it. But remember, there's all the emails and the letters and the phone calls that come in that are equally a part of that process of communication. But they're probably the impact probably is the same as any town meetings you have, except now they're a little more vigorous and a little stronger opinions expressed as well.
Congressman Blum said that, like, Republicans have the handbook that's being passed around along some kind of liberal-leaning organizations that organize these and kind of show how to organize best to have the biggest impact. Is there some kind of pushback against that these are organized and that these are planned out and these aren't necessarily as organic as?
I don't think there needs to be a pushback, because whether they're organized or unorganized, they serve the same purpose. So I think the best thing to do is not worry about that. Now, if you go to internets, you can get instructions. People can get instructions how to make yourself heard and issues to bring up. But maybe some people follow it and maybe some people don't follow it. But whether they follow it or not, I don't know. The point being that you listen to people if they just want to make a statement, or you answer questions as best you can.
Senator, last time I asked this question, in the last town hall you had, you said that most of the people who are in here are here because they are upset about the election, but when they're asking questions, it really sounds like they're upset with how the administration's moving quickly and some of the concerns with what's going on in the Trump administration. Do you still think that it's as far as the election, losing the election?
Well, of course, Trump was elected, and now he's serving. And so I think now they're expressing opposition to some of his policies. But so far, almost everything he's done is the things he said he ought to be done in the election. And you want to remember, he was elected by a majority of the people in a majority of the states. And he's in office now. And he's only been in office 33 days. And I don't know whether people should make too quick of a judgment of how he's going to be.
So do you feel like voices are being heard by holding these town hall meetings?
I'm being heard. I'm listening to my constituents, if that's what you're asking me.
Follow-up question to that. Today's forum was held at 10 a.m. on a Thursday when most of your constituents are working. How is the middle of the day and the middle of the week the right time to meet with working class constituents?
When you have 99 counties to go to, you have to take almost any time of day. You have to you never get through the 99 counties. So what I tried to do to make up for the shortcomings you talked about of people actually working, and your question's very legitimate, I tried to do 3 or 4 other things other than just having an open town meeting. I never get young people. You didn't find any young people out here. I mean, high school or college. So I go to maybe 10 high schools a year. I go to a few Rotary or Lions clubs a year because those small business people generally can't come to my town meetings. And then for the factory and production workers, I've had a lot of good meetings on the factory floor, answering questions where they actually shut down the assembly line. So I think over the course of a year, I get a good cross-section of people, both those that can come to open town meetings and those that can't come to town.
There's been a lot of conversation about education and sort of Trump's, not only his cabinet, a lot of questions about that as well. When people were trying to connect with you about that, you gave a great answer, but if you would, the questions that people have about Trump's cabinet, can you just focus in on that for a little bit and give me a reaction to why people seem so uneasy about it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's a lot of Democrat obstruction to it, because as Senator Thune did some research, found out that this is the longest it's taken to get a cabinet in place since George Washington. So the process is not going very smoothly, and it's going to be a long time before we get the entire cabinet picked. But in regard to a president's cabinet, it's been more or less the attitude until now, and I think the next president will go back to that attitude. But when you're a new president and you've got a mandate from the people to carry that out, you ought to have the people that you want. So there were a lot of people that I voted for in Obama's cabinet that maybe I didn't agree with, and maybe I thought they shouldn't be in that particular position, but I accepted that proposition. Do I sometimes vote against cabinet people? Yes, sometimes I do.
My last question is, you see a lot of passion right now around the country. Passion. A lot of people have passion. How do you react? You've been doing this for quite some time. How do you feel with what you're seeing so far?
compared to 2009 and Tea Party people coming around, sometimes it's easier to deal with some Democrats than some Republicans. And then I went through it last year because I was the focal point of the effort to get a hearing for Garland. And this is nothing compared to those other two instances.
What would it,
Senator, I'm John Skipper from the Globe Gazette in Mason City.
After all these years, you
yeah.
shouldn't have to tell me that. But
Well,
I'm glad you did.
I was going to say, if it seems like I'm following you around, I am.
Okay.
The question I have is, you've heard from so many different people now at the town meetings you've had. Have you heard anything that's made you change your mind on anything that's
No, but it's reinforced a lot of things that I think, particularly in regard to health care, reinforced that there is strong feelings about some things I've already taken a position on. No pre-existing conditions, kids being on their parents' insurance till the age 26. Also, no lifetime cap, that sort of thing. Those are things that during the campaign I talked about, and you wondered if they're still on people's minds, and without a doubt, there's nothing new, but it reinforces. But also at a town meeting like this, where since I'm a Republican, and I've talked about repeal of Obamacare for so long, that they may not know that that was my position, so I also had a chance to inform them of something that ought to please them very much.
Is the timeline for repealing the Affordable Care Act coming out of the House or somewhere around March?
House.
Do you think that's
I think there'll be a bill made public next week, and I think that I don't know what it'll say, but I think it'll have some of these things in that we're talking about.
Senator, you mentioned, I think a statistic, Grant Rogers with the Des Moines Register, by the way, about Washington journalists and their voting.
Yeah.
Do you think either you or your staff could provide a site for where that statistics comes from? That's something I hadn't heard before.
And I think there's a recent statistic, and there's also a 1990s statistic. And I'm not sure that we can find it, but we'll be glad to find it. And I think in most instances it was in the low 90%. And so I'm not questioning that in fact I said very clearly, the press is not an enemy. But also, I think it's fair to say if they are willing to admit that they vote 90% for a Democratic president for President of the United States, it might be reasonable to question whether they're unbiased or not.
The other question I had is, I spoke with several people before, and one thing that I heard come up that I'm not sure if it came up during the sort of town hall, there's been a lot of reporting about the costs of the first family's travel and what it's cost the federal government for Trump to spend the weekends at Mar-a-Lago. Is that an issue you're concerned about, that you'd be interested in looking into? What are your thoughts on that?
Not at this point, but maybe in 6 months I'd be willing to do that, but I would want to compare it to what other presidents have done, because security is, I think most of what you're talking about is the airplane, where you travel in the airplane. But don't forget, that's probably a small part of it compared to Secret Service and all the other stuff that goes on to protect the president, which everybody has an understanding is equal. By the way, you said you're from the Register. I'll refer to somebody that I won't name of a few years ago, that he was never registered to vote because he thought that he had to be very, very independent as a reporter for the Des Moines Register.
What would it take for you to advocate the implementation of the 25th Amendment for Donald Trump?
Incapacity?
Correct.
Yeah, that's not an issue.
Why isn't it an issue?
Well, no, you tell me why it is an issue. Then I'll answer your question.
I don't think we're the first person to ask this. I know several national media.
You're the first one to ask me.
And several national media several national media nationwide have asked the question that the 25th Amendment is a possibility to be implemented. They're saying it's a long shot, but you're a senator. You would hold phase 3 of that.
Am I not? I need to read the 25th Amendment, but isn't that something that there's a presidential determination? is it triggered by a presidential determination?
First step would be the vice president and the cabinet. Second step would be the president would declare himself to be fine. And then the third step, it would go to the Senate for a ruling. And
well, let's take it a step at a time.
One more question. Regarding Trump's new immigration orders, how do you ensure civil liberties aren't being violated by ICE agents attempting to identify immigrants?
There are so many immigration lawyers checking on almost every move they made. If there is, you'll know about it.
So you don't feel that's your position?
Oh yeah, it's my position to make sure the laws are faithfully enforced, but I don't enforce them. And so if there is some violation, it's got to be within the executive branch of government. But remember that that's the Attorney General's responsibility, and when Session was before our committee, he, without a doubt, convinced everybody his independence from any presidential decisions. He's going to be a counselor for the American people and not for the President of the United States.
Thank you.
Can you
We've
tell me
actually
what
got to
your
wrap it up
overall
right there.
feeling is when you walk out of the town meetings?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what your overall feeling is when
Yeah,
you walk out of
whatever
some
the
of these town
source
meetings?
of
Is
that
it
was.
overwhelmed or is it a good feeling?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate
Thanks for
it.
coming.
Yeah.
That I have fulfilled one of my many responsibilities as a representative. If you're going to be a good representative, you gotta know what's on people's minds.
good.
But as you heard me say, this isn't the only way you get that opinion. You gotta read your emails, you gotta read your postal mail, you gotta listen to people on the phone. People come to my office in Washington. I reserve 3 to 5 Monday through Thursdays for 8 15-minute appointments. And I suppose there's a dozen other ways I do it, but all that adds up to be a representative of the people. And I feel exhilarated by whether you have a friendly crowd or a non-friendly crowd, with just how important it is the process of representative government works.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.